Assalamu alaikum and good day. Welcome to In Conversation with me, FEMIDA Kasim. Joining us today is Ndileka Mandela, the eldest granddaughter of the late Nelson Mandela. Welcome, Ndileka, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for ITV for having me this afternoon.
Lovely. Ndileka, it's really an honor to have you discuss and have a conversation with us. Would you be able to share briefly about yourself and how your life's been so far?
Well, I usually introduce myself by saying that I'm the first of the first of the first. The first grandchild from the first wife from the first son. Grew up in the rural Eastern Cape, well, a brief stint in Orlando East until I turned 7. And then my grandmother, Nelson Mandela's first wife, relocated to the Eastern Cape. I was to spend the bulk of my life in the Eastern Cape. Grew up in this village town which formed and crystallized my character, and the sum total of what you see today was molded by Evelyn. My principles, my value system, the way I think, it's sum total of how Evelyn brought me up. When I became an adult, after finishing high school, I had a brief stint in teacher training, but I fell pregnant. After that, I started nursing after my son was born. And when I finished nursing, I went to work at St. Aidan's in ICU. Went to Medunsa to further my studies. When that did not work out in terms of financial support, I went back to nursing. I can safely say in the nursing field, I've done a full circle, because from bedside nursing, I went to community nursing. I also went to a pathology lab. From there, I migrated to pharmaceutical wrapping. Did a bit of medical aid, then I quit nursing altogether. So it was after I quit nursing, I had a brief stint at Quest Staffing Solutions, which was an HR company. After that, I thought to myself, you know what, maybe I don't want to be employed. I started with a group of other friends. We started a mining company that also didn't gel because of the characters. When there's no chemistry between people, that fell through. And shortly after that, I then was in charge of a RDP housing project in Rift Valley, which is in the Mogale city. When that project finished, it is then that, I started, by then I was in my mid-40s. I started, okay, this is it. I don't want to get employed anymore. And I mean, I had started my spiritual journey around the age of 40. And at that time, I decided that there is a greater purpose to my life on earth, because I believe that God creates us to fulfill that purpose. And it was when I was still not sure of what to do, when a gentleman friend of the family, shortly after Granddad got ill in 2011, approached me to say that the school that my grandfather went to, Clarkbury, which is and that's where I also went to do my teacher training, was in a state of dilapidation. I must adopt the school. And at that time, I thought to myself, what do I do with it? It is then that the seed for the Mbeki Mandela Foundation was planted. And I spoke to Granddad that, since the Nelson Mandela Foundation was no longer doing programs of schools and health, let me house them under my father's name. And the reason behind that of my father is that in the lifespan of my grandfather, his life, my father's life, is mentioned very sporadically, that he was born, he died in a car crash in 1969, and boom, that's it. And yet my father got married. He had my sister and I, Nandi. And I lived through him. He lived through me, and vice versa. It was to keep his memory alive, and also to assuage the pain that Granddad, suffered because he lost his firstborn. And I could glean that it was the pain that he never even wanted to revisit or even to talk about, because whenever I would ask him about that, Granddad would shut down completely and he would never want to engage. And subsequent to that, I then became a fierce gender activist, owing to the fact that in 2012, I was raped by my own partner in our own home, but I came 5 years later during the Me Too campaign. And from that time, I honored the voice that I have in terms of gender activism and also a social activist. That's me in a nutshell.
So you went from being a nurse, you went into business, into HR, and then a gender activist. It's an amazing journey.
And thank you. Thank you.
And don't you miss nursing?
I'm still a nurse, but it's something that I relate to, and it's something that came with so much ease. I flew through my nursing career, and to this day, I'm still the resident nurse. And I sometimes tell my family, guys, you do understand that I have not been bedside nursing for a long time. But it's amazing how, when I see something, my daughter would ask me something, and that knowledge would just come out instantly. I mean, now during this COVID time, one of the things that I was advising, people on Facebook and on my page, my followers, is that, well, it's well and good to go and test for COVID, but what then after COVID? It's best to treat every flu as if it's COVID, because it's not as if when you test positive, they're going to give you something. And one of the things that I did advise them to take was to add a bit of cortisone, because, shortly after my aunt died, Mzinzi, I had a terrible chest. And it was when I added prednisone to the list of medication that I was taking that I felt that it eased off. I mean, when I was coughing, I could feel that my chest was being torn apart. And from then onwards, because it just came out that actually that's one of the things that they give asthma patients. It's anti-inflammatory. It also drains the water in the lungs. So that's a demonstration of how nursing is part of me. It has become part of my DNA. It's something that I don't have to scratch my head about. Even when I watch drama, my daughter said, but that's not true. This is how it happens. And she will go, these children with the age of Google, they'll go and Google, oh, yeah, mom. I said, I know my stuff.
I recall reading somewhere that you were the middle point between your grandfather and the doctors. You were the point of communication where you would share the information with the family as to what was happening in terms of your grandfather's health. How was that? How was that journey for you, sharing that information during such a delicate time?
It was difficult. And the flip side of that is that most of the time I would water down because the doctors did not have to tell me anything. I could read charts to an extent that at some point when he was at hospital in 2013, they would hide the charts from me. But even then, I would just look at the monitor and know what's happening. And even when Granddad was on dialysis, I can, because I'm also a renal nurse, I went to King Edward VIII to train as a renal nurse. So I could interpret a lot of things without them saying anything. So at times I would water down the information because I did not want to scare them. But that also put me on the back foot in terms of processing Granddad's illness, because instead of being the granddaughter, I became the nurse and also shielding some of the information and absorbing some of the shocking, tests and medication that was having a lot of side effects on him. And that put me back to an extent that when he then died, after he got buried, I literally, came apart, literally. And a friend of mine said, look, I had a paid up trip. He said, look, choose any country in the world, I'll pay for the trip. You just need to be on your own. And I mean, that did me a lot of good. I chose Mauritius because the other places were already fully booked. And during those 10 days, I would spend the night time all by myself in my room. I would cry myself to sleep, get up the next day, go to the pool, interact with people. And whenever the moments came for me to cry, I would do that. And that really healed me because it allowed me to process the whole 3 years that Granddad was sick, that I couldn't because I was the nurse, not a child that was processing that this is a person that is transitioning to the next life.
Must have been really tough for you. And what do you miss the most about your grandfather?
It is his sense of humor and his sense of wrong and right. You know, Granddad had a sense of humor parallel to none, and also the ability to poke fun at yourself, to laugh at yourself. And I do that all the time. I mean, you know, there's terminology. I mean, like, for instance, I did not know that LOL means laugh out loud. I thought it was lots of love. You know, and when I say these things, sometimes I say them over social media and people say, but Ndileka, and I will just laugh. And that's the ability. I got that from him. I learned from him how it's healthy to be able to poke fun at yourself, because most of the time we take ourselves too seriously. That's number one. And also his sense of wrong and right, and sense of family and community. Granddad, one of the reasons Granddad insisted he wanted to be buried in the Eastern Cape was that he believed that it was his form of give back to the province that made him who he is, who he was. And because at a later stage, that burial place is going to be open to the public, and you know, it will be a center of the economic hub, also as a give back to the people that formed his early life. So I got that, you know, from him, and also from my grandmother. I mean, my grandmother is a person that taught me from an early age. You know, I had two grandparents that doted on me, both my maternal and my paternal grandmother. My paternal grandmother is the one that brought me up, Evelyn. But my maternal grandmother spoiled me in terms of the latest designer clothes, and I had lots and lots of clothes. And my grandmother encouraged myself and my sister to give out clothes that we were not wearing, because we were boarding school, some of them would be, you know, would outgrow them or get tired of them. We've worn it once or twice, and she always encouraged us to give to people that had less. So from both these strong characters, I learned a lot of things from them.
And tell me, what is the phrase that you still remember the most that Madiba would tell you? What were the words that still echo in your mind today when you think of him?
It would be, it's important to go back home. You know, it's something that we would always laugh about, because he would, I mean, Granddad was in his element in the Eastern Cape, and he would tell us how important it was to interact with community people, and he would regale us with stories that, you know, the neighbor came about a chicken that, you know, the other one slaughtered, and we would laugh and thought this was funny. That, you know, here was this man that used to be the head of state and intervening over chicken of chicken story in the village. But I can now appreciate now as a grandparent now how important it is to give back to communities that made you who you are. Because the Eastern Cape, the rural space, I'm still a rural girl at heart, made me who I am. And the value system that I subscribe to has made me who I am, and has also made me not to be apologetic about my views, about my value system. And these are the two things that, you know, these two people, Granddad was not apologetic about his views at all.
I'm going to come back to you about the program. I want to know more about it, but we're going to break now for a little ad break. Welcome back and thank you for joining us. In studio, in conversation with me today is Ndileka Mandela, the eldest granddaughter of the late Nelson Mandela. I believe with all the campaigns and programs that you're busy with, you're also doing the Leading Mandela program. Tell me more about this program and other initiatives that you're working on.
Well, the Living Like Mandela program, it came through a friend of mine, Ndileka Azam, When I started the foundation in 2014, he had spoken to me about the Leading Like Mandela earlier on, but when he then approached me in 2014 and asked me if there was any leadership program that was crafted under the in the format of my grandfather's leadership style, I said to him, look, no. And frankly, I don't know anything about leadership. And because he was in that space, he said, look, I will let us design a program of looking at the leadership style of your grandfather. From the time that he was a child to the time that he comes to go to Forte, to Johannesburg, he becomes a lawyer, he becomes now the Black Pimpernel, and he becomes a political prisoner. So we looked at various phases of his life, of how he crafted himself. Oh, there's my granddaughter. He crafted himself, and I maintain that Granddad's leadership style was crystallized when he was a child, because oftentimes people think of that leadership is something that you develop as an adult, and I would beg to differ, because my grandfather became the leader that he was from watching tribal council and saw how the King Jomindaba would conduct tribal council. But throughout his life, at each stage of his life, he had mentors, which is important, which is what we do with the Leading Like Mandela. A mentorship program, breakaway sessions, think tanks that inform policy. It's a leadership framework. And for me, it's important, excuse me, it's important, especially in grooming the next leaders, because we have seen how good governance, attracts funding. And we have seen how the lack of good governance has brought us to the point that we are right now in South Africa. Yes, COVID has affected us in terms of economics. However, if we had good governance, we would fare much better than we are right now. The end results of the various corruption cases that we have brought us to where we are, which is lack of good governance. So the Leading Like Mandela it's about ethical and moral leadership, which is important, especially to build as youth. And that's one thing I maintain with Ndileka, that as much as we say that we can teach it to leaders, to heads of industry, captains of industry, my interest is the youth, because I believe that it is the youth's mind that you can still inform and be able to craft. Because at a certain age, a person has got their identity formed and crystallized, and you can't change their thinking process. Here I am telling you right now that my identity was formed by Evelyn, by how she brought me up. That's one of the programs, Leading Like Mandela. At the Ndileka Mandela Foundation, because Leading Like Mandela is more like a business model, because we decided that it's well and good to have programs that are espoused by the foundation, which I will delve to right now. However, it's important for us to create our own pool of funding, because this program is a program where we involved trainers and also coaches to deliver our program.
Please tell us more about the program that you do, Leading Mandela program that you're busy with.
Yes, that's a program that we are now busy with, besides the other programs of the Ndileka Mandela Foundation, which are health education. In health, just briefly, we're just doing one program which talks to adults and girls, which we call Pride of the Rural Girl, where we raise funds to buy sanitary wear for girls that miss school when they menstruate. Education one is the one where we have a leveraging of the fourth industrial revolution in terms of computer labs, science laboratories, sports facilities, and libraries. And then you have youth development, which talks to the Leading Like Mandela program that we are busy rolling now with different embassies. One of them is the embassy of Kazakhstan, for instance, that they want to anchor the program in one of their universities in Kazakhstan under the African Studies department at that institution. And it's also a program that we launched with the University of Johannesburg and with the Department of Internationalization in 2018, the year that Granddad would have turned 100. So that's in a nutshell the program that we're doing, but the one that we are driving now is mostly the Leading Like Mandela program, because if you look globally, that's where we are lacking in the world in terms of good leadership, especially in Africa.
What more advice do you think that we need to give leaders out there in terms of them lacking what you say they have in terms of leadership?
It's what in Leading Mandela we advocate for intrinsic leadership more than positional leadership, because oftentimes people think leading is about positions. No, we're talking about leading from inside out, leading based on a value system, a good value system, on good ethics, on good morals, which is how the generation of my grandfather were leading. And oftentimes people tend to think that to be a leader, you have to be in a certain position, you have to, or to be a politician, a minister, a DG. No, that's not the kind of leadership. Everybody can be a leader. We're talking about, because in order to be able to lead, you need to be able to lead self. How do you then start leading self? And we copy that exactly from Granddad. Granddad led from within, led self first. He had a routine every day of waking up, making your bed up, a certain routine, and that's how you hive off your time throughout the continuum of your day. That's the leadership that you're talking about, and that's the advice that I would give, is that stop seeking leaders out there. You can lead yourself, and the first role model of any individual is the people that are close to him. Yes, I do understand that oftentimes in your close vicinity, you don't have good role models as leaders. And it's important for you, if you want to develop, pick one person. Yes, people, the Leading Like Mandela also is not to say, it's an entry point for us to have an Africa Leadership Institute, because if you look at Africa, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We've had humanitarian giants, good leaders, Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, the list is endless. And pick one of the leaders. Pick Stephen Biko, for instance. This is a person that you would love to emulate. You can pick any number of leaders, from politicians to captains of industry, to community leaders within your own community, to the uncle next door, to the auntie, in a village. That's the kind of leadership that I'm talking about.
Yes, no, that's well said, and good advice for all of us. I heard that you mentioned about Kazakhstan. I believe that they're going to name a street after Nelson Mandela in Kazakhstan. When is this going to happen?
It would have happened this year, not for COVID. So we are now, I think it will happen in the early part of next year. And as a family member, I am really humbled that to this day, it's going to be 7 years since Granddad passed. People are still holding him in high esteem and that's because of how Granddad led and what kind of person he was.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Ndileka. And I wish you all the best and the family with all your endeavors. And please, oh yes, the book. I believe you're going to give us 2 books that you've written.
Yes, I've written this book. I am Ndileka more than surname. My surname, which delves into how I was brought up, what made me the person I am, the challenges of being a Mandela, because people often think that being a Mandela is a bed of roses, it's a walk in the park. and also how I've grown as a person since starting with the Mandela Foundation.
Lovely. So Ndileka is going to give ITV viewers two books that she's written over herself, and we're going to actually post the questions. Yes? Oh, and she's signed it. She's put her signature to it. So two lucky viewers will be getting this book. I am Ndileka. So we're going to put some questions on the screen, and our viewers who would like to win this book can send us a message or respond via phoning us with the answer. But remember, you've got to get the answer correct, and then you could win the book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for ITV for having me this afternoon. It's been really phenomenal. I hope that I can next time I'll be able to come to the studio. You know, unfortunately today I'm not feeling so well, and I just need to take care of myself.
It's fine. You do take care of yourself, and hopefully when you're feeling much better, we'll have you in studio, and we want to talk more about the Nelson Mandela program that you're working on. I think a lot of us need to learn from that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the viewers.